Hi, morning everybody. Morning, Steve. We're back with
Morning.
Steve again. He's going to just run through a little bit about how he changed from bodybuilding to a more rounded, um, strongman related style of training. First of all, we've got a little video of Way Consortium, which is the place that was the sort of forerunner of some of the more strongman gyms that are around. A lot of the big guys from World's Strongest Man used to train up there, like Charlet and people like that. So I'll put that up now. I'll just watch that. You should see it there. Put play on there, and I'll be quiet. It's a cool looking gym though.
Yeah.
Proper old school feels to it. I think it's Laurie Charlet. Steve Gardner. That's definitely Laurie Charlet on the tyre.
It is.
So there you have it. That gives you an idea of basically where Steve was with it. If you want to carry on with your little story about how you got into it, then I've got some pictures.
Yeah. For me, I'd seen an advert, and I can't remember which magazine it were in.
Hang on,
And it was
for
for.
2 seconds. Ah. Oh, that was a bit I'll have to cut out. Yeah, go on, Steve. Sorry.
Yeah, for me, it was a magazine called Muscle Mob, and I can't remember which magazine I'd seen it in, but I thought, yeah, that looks interesting because it was all about
We'll see it on the screen there. One of the copies.
the history of everything. And I've always been inquisitive, so I ordered it, and I liked it, and it very old school, very from the heart type of training articles. There were a lot of different people writing in it, and it was that opened my eyes to a different way of training. And then through that, I actually took out an advertisement in it myself, looking for old magazines, old VHSs, things like that, which I met one or two people that I could buy off. And also another book by a guy called Alan Radley, The Illustrated History of Physical Culture, which went into everything in a lot more detail. And then when you sort of reading things like that and seeing some of the old articles and images in Muscle Mob, you realise that there's a completely different way to train. And it's all been done before. It's just reinventing the wheel and trying to make it look more complicated.
Well, of course it is.
When I
started my gym out over here, we were in Sandown Road, but Eugene Sandown in the 1900s was basically doing exactly the same thing as we're doing 200 or 100 plus years later, so yeah.
I mean, those guys were phenomenally strong, and as a bodybuilder, yeah, you're strong, but I could never imagine putting up the weights that they were putting up with one arm, in things like the bench press, 400 pounds more or more.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just, you're looking at the body positions that they're in, and your bodybuilding brain saying, no, you can't lift like that, you're going to break. Yet these guys did. And you didn't hear of them having anywhere near the number of injuries that you would see yourself in a gym.
No.
From somebody doing flies or shoulder pressing.
The thing is,
yeah, they did get injured.
Don't forget, last we touched on steroids a lot in the last episode.
Yeah.
I think in the early days prior to, in Sandown's days and stuff like that, they just went by feel. So with their diet, it was a lot of red meat and a lot of things like that, where you're getting loads of extra creatine and things in your body naturally. But it was all done naturally without these the chemical performance. And then obviously later on with strongman and stuff, the doses were a lot lower back then as well, and that makes a big difference, I think, to how things are going. But yeah, it's definitely
these guys in the late 1800s, early 1900s were putting insane amount of weight up with no drugs, and you're sort of thinking, how are they doing that? Because you were led to believe through the mainstream muscle press that it all went on, and if you wanted to be the best and look a certain way, eventually you would have to do it. Yet a lot of these guys were lean in the early days, very lean. I mean, Sandow and Hackenschmidt were lean, and yet bodybuilders bulked up so that they could lift heavy weights.
But then I think, I mean, obviously you talked about physical culture. There's that broadness there where at the beginning, obviously, they like improve their bodies. They learnt that to lift weights, or to improve their bodies, they lifted weights. Then as that expanded, that brought in more of the body beautiful. So if you come into the sort of 40s, I mean, look at Sean Connery, for example. Sean Connery was Mr. Universe or Mr. Britain or whatever it was at the time, with a very middling physique. I mean, it wasn't the physiques that we know of today or anywhere close to it. It wasn't even close to Eugene Sandown and people like that. Yet that was the sort of move towards that sort of more aesthetic. Look, Steve Reeves, people like that in the Tarzan movies. Johnny Weissmuller as an Olympic athlete, you know, played Tarzan. Was an Olympic swimmer.
But that was it. It was all about health. I mean, one of the main magazines that I collected for a while was called Physical Culture by Bernard McFadden. And that was a health magazine. Diet, mental side of things, the physical side of things. It was all about promoting being healthy, because even back then, a lot of people were getting ill, and there was a realization that the lifestyles, even though they were more physical than what we are today, they were still wrong. There was still an overconsumption of food. People were fat. People weren't doing as much exercise as what their generations before them had done. And the whole thing just exploded. I mean, those magazines, I think the earliest one I had was 1893. You know, so it's been around for a long time.
Yeah. Do you remember, I don't know, Jack LaLanne was a guy that was very famous in the day for being one of the first people on television promoting general health and fitness. So from, you know, the basic magazine style of training. So he was the one that first we used to wear almost lycra type clothing. I remember him in these tight bottoms and these. But he passed away in the last 5 years. You know, he was 93 or something. He was still doing a regular physical exercise every day, even up until then. I think his wife's still alive, and she still promotes health. If she isn't alive now, she was very, very, very recently. But you have people like that as well that are promoting physical culture and general exercise. I don't think he was a big heavyweight lifter, and you know, there's pictures of him back in the day with, you know, biceps and sort of the at the stone stuff. But again, it wasn't as big a thing as I've got to build this huge, great big physique, and I've got to have these, you know, your shoulders out here, and you know, backs as wide as you know, Dorian Yates's back and stuff like that. But it was about promoting good aesthetical looks and good physical health, you know, and well-being, which, you know, Jack LaLanne proved that it was well worth it living into his 90s, well into his 90s, and exercising well into his 90s. You know, I remember watching him on TV. You know? Yeah,
if you look at the old pictures of the old physical culturist gyms with Sandow and one or two others that are out there, they're very much like a CrossFit gym today. You were encouraged to not only lift weights, but also do gymnastics, climb ropes, cardio work on very old rowing machines and exercise bikes.
If you look at the pictures of Victorian, purely Victorian gyms, they were more like an old school PE style room with boxes and rigs on the walls and pull-up bars, and rope climbing and things like that. So yes, I mean, I'm not that fond of the CrossFit style, as you well know, but the ideas behind it are very good, and it does promote that mix. I don't like again, touching on CrossFit slightly, a lot of the ideas that CrossFit had when it first started were fantastic and worked very well. The unfortunate thing is, with things like Reebok getting hold of it and promoting it as a sport and it becoming a sport, everyone goes back into that whole thing of pushing and pushing and pushing. So many of them, they'll all deny it, but many of the people that are CrossFitters are using gear as performance enhancing drugs to get them by, where they're not really necessary if you are doing it for your general health. As I said in previous talks that we've had, my injuries are because I pushed the limits when I was in strongman. If I'd carried on not pushing quite so hard, not flipping a 450 kilo tire and maybe mucking around with a 200 or 300 kilo tire or something, I wouldn't have torn my bicep and not trying to deadlift for reps at speed at 220 kilos and tearing a quad muscle totally unrealistically, really. They're things that happen in competition, not in your general training.
Well, with the old strongmen, I mean, it was, from everything that I've read myself, a lot of it was about practicing a lift. You mastered the lift. It wasn't purely about lifting the heaviest weight, unless of course they went into a competition and they will compete against each other. But it was all about practice. Not putting, I mean, you can't really do force reps, can you, with a bench press? It's just, it's impossible. But this is how they kept injuries down, but also made themselves extremely strong.
So excuse my picture falling over in the back there. Never mind. It's all going on today, isn't it?
Yeah, we'll get
I can
there.
hear it going. Yes, sorry about that, but yes, I agree totally with what you were just saying. And a little bit of humour's just been added in there. I'm just going to sit there.
But I mean, from reading Muscle Mob, and then getting Alan Radley's book, buying some Physical Culture magazines, I started looking more into the strong, because it does get classed as strongman when in fact is it or isn't it? You wonder what to call it, because you're two types of strongman. You'd a vaudeville strongman and you'd also a circus strongman.
But if you actually look at the guys from vaudeville strongman or circus strongman, even not the sort of plastic bending of a barbell, but the proper strongman that used to lift two people up, or the big displays of strength. I remember when I was a kid seeing a guy balancing milk boxes, the old plastic milk boxes on his head. He was a strongman, but he was putting like 32 of these things up on his head and walking around balancing them. You've got to be strong to be able to do that. I mean, it's a good show, but it's about getting strong and maintaining that sort of strength as much as it is anything else. So it's about keeping that balance, I think, to keep it healthy. Go on.
Yeah, with me, I had, because I got to a point where I couldn't get to a gym because of work. All the stuff that I was picking up from these magazines and these books, I could then start doing at home, buying barrels, buying farmers' walks, implements, Atlas stones, thick barbells, and experimenting with it. And I've always thought that getting into it when I did has helped me, because touch wood, back injuries, no. I stopped using a belt, because I used to use a belt all the time with bodybuilding, because everybody used a belt. You've got to use a belt to squat and deadlift.
Yeah.
I got rid of that. Even now, I never use a belt. It's 20 odd years since I've had a belt, and you don't need it, because it teaches you and it gets those deep muscles firing that protect your spine.
I think with strongman particularly, you see them in competitions, they use a waist support, then a belt over the top of it. Again, this tends to be really for the big guys when they're in competition, when they're pushing it big and
Yeah.
hard and heavy. Eddie Hall mentioned that he stopped wearing a belt when he does his training, so he'll go up to like 300 and something kilos deadlifting before he starts to put a belt on at the heavier lift for him, the heavier lifts.
Yeah.
And equally, I mean, Julie, my wife, lifts as in strongwoman, but she was in the gym doing military presses not that long ago now, and she was lifting a substantial weight for her body type and shape, and with a belt on. She put the weight down, happy with her PB and stuff, took the belt off, and as she took the belt off, because everything suddenly collapsed that was being held taut because of the belt, she actually pushed the disc out and ended up having to take 8 weeks off to help it recover. And this was just prior to a competition, and had to go into the competition not 100%. And it's never a good thing, you know, not going into competitions 100%. And unfortunately, the nature of strongman sometimes is that you get to that point where you either have to work through injuries, work around an injury, or unfortunately, there are times where you have to, you know, when I tore my bicep, I couldn't lift with that arm. I was probably still going in the gym and still doing a little bit here and there and using the other hand and stuff. But, you know, that's when you get those sort of imbalances and issues, you know.
Yeah. But with the old time guys, they learn how to create tension everywhere to lift. And when you create that tension and you learn how to properly breathe and brace, you don't need belts, and you can lift more and lift more safely.
You find,
you know, you watch a lot of people squatting now, you know, in a regular Globo gym, you know, and they're puffing and panting halfway through a rep. They're taking multiple breaths.
You'll find a lot of my my clients will attest to the fact that I talk a lot about bracing when they lift, because it is such an important part. So whether it's an overhead press and you're having to brace to stabilize your feet, or whether it's just to brace and stabilize your core, it's an important thing that a lot of my clients do. And again, as you say, in our gym where I work, you'll go in and you see a lot of people, and they go, "Oh, do I need a belt, or do I need this?" And it's like, well, no. I mean, you've got to be pushing a lot more weight than that before I'd even suggest using a belt. And even then, it's more a psychological thing than it is a physical thing to help you get that extra little bit. If you're squatting, say your squat's 200 kilos, and you want to push 20 or 30 kilos onto your squat, for example, putting a belt on gives you a lot more mental strength to go and do the lift. And it's that part of it that maybe it's false, maybe it's not, that's going to give you that little bit of extra bracing. So when you're in the bottom of the squat, you can feel yourself pushing against that band around your waist and then get out of the hole. But again, that's when you're hitting a max rep lift 20 or 30 kilos heavier than you do normally. And that's a big part of it, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I've had many a conversation with one of the guys over at Weightlifting Club, and he's a bit older than me, injuries like I've had and stiffness and stuff, and we both come to conclusion that if you followed some of the old school exercises, it actually also increases flexibility and strength on that end range of motion. Because he told me when he first started out, there were a lot of lifts that he used to do back then that kept his hips open, his shoulders open, and then as you start to learn stuff and then start specializing, stuff like that, you let go. Yet now when we try and do some of this stuff, we can't get down into those positions.
Yeah, it's true to a degree. I think it's more mobility than flexibility, and I think we confuse this sometimes with it. You know, doing box splits between two chairs, holding the barbell over your head, isn't what we want to do. But
no,
if you look at some of the African cultures, particularly, and some of the South American cultures, where they'll sit in the bottom of a squat position, comfortably making a pot of tea or whatever they do, you know, grinding rice and stuff. And they'll sit there for hours like that. And that's in a natural squat position because they do it naturally all the time. Yeah. That's about being mobile in the hips and stuff. We lose that. And then again, we sit in chairs like we're doing now, and all of those cars.
That's why I like positions with the bench press and sort of the variant windmill, where you're leaning down to touch the floor. You're working the hamstring of the straight leg. You're also twisting the trunk and opening up the shoulders when you're starting to look up and you've got the weight above your head. And if you were to try to do that in a regular gym, they probably wouldn't let you.
I don't. Yeah, they'll let you, but they won't know what you're doing particularly, because they let everyone do whatever they want in most gyms these days. I'm a fan more of the bent press. More of the windmill than the bent press. We do a lot of windmills in kettlebell work that I do in classes and stuff. And again, I mean, we do the bent press, but I think it's sort of lost a little bit of what it's there for. Certainly with the kettlebells and things. In a class situation, it might be there. Like a 2 arms anyhow would be more of an interesting lift where you've got to get both different weights above your head. And then you use the bent press to get one up there and then clean and press the other one, that sort of exercise. I should find some extra little clips that we can put up for those next time. So when we do talk about specific exercises, we can put a clip up or a picture up at least to show what we're actually talking about. I mean, a lot of these lifts, if anyone is interested, are in the All Round Weightlifting Association book, and they give you a full guided explanation of every lift, from the bent press, 1 arms anyhow, 2 arms anyhow, so the Reeves deadlift, all sorts of lifts that we might sort of encroach on or touch on in exercise. But if you look at it, the All Round Weightlifting Association is what you want to look up, and on there they have a PDF file that you can download with all the instructions on and rules on how to do the lift. So.
Well, like that, another one. I mean, I'm going to start doing these again. Next cycle that I'm doing is the barbell hack squat, named after Hackenschmidt, old-time strongman and wrestler. You rarely see that done anywhere, and it's a fantastic exercise.
The problem, the thing with the hack squat is that everyone loves a hack squat machine. The hack squat machine and the hack squat with a bar are two very, very different exercises. The hack squat with the bar should be done much more often. The hack squat with machine can put, especially with the weights that people are doing and the partial reps that people are doing, can put a massive amount of strain on the knee joints. When they could really do without that pressure. We're all going out running now and running on hard surfaces, which we never had to run on before, But unfortunate thing is concrete paving stones and paving slabs are very, very hard on the joints. So they muck your knees up a little bit more than if you were running on tarmac or on muddy pathways in the park and stuff. So all of those together, compound, can aggravate these things. Go back to normal hack squats as you're talking about, and equally safe on the knees, good for your posterior chain, all sorts of things.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've never found an exercise as good for targeting around the knees. And we'll get to this at a later date. When I was running, I actually wished I'd used that exercise more to stop some of the wear and tear that I possibly did to my own knees, especially when I was doing races where I got a lot of weight on my back.
Yeah, I can see that definitely helping. And again, I mean, when I first opened my gym up in Portugal, we didn't have machines, no leg curls, no leg extension machines. We had barbells, dumbbells, racks, a rig, and some functional equipment like tires and sledgehammers and things, which I love, by the way. So when we came, if we had a bodybuilder that would come into the gym, they'd go, well, how can I do, tricep cable press downs or whatever. So we'd have to resort back to some of the old school lifts, like the hack squat for your quads and things, front squatting, a lot of the exercises that maybe you don't see in mainstream gyms, the cross-armed front squat as opposed to a wrapped front squat, that sort of stuff. There's a lot of movement and changes there that are coming back around, because of CrossFit, because of Olympic lifting popularity. There's a lot more people in our gym. Our gym now has two squat racks, 2 functional areas and 2 functional areas on the rigs. And then we have a ladies only area, which also has 2 more squat racks in there. And though the people might not necessarily know what they should be doing on them so much, they are now becoming much more widely available in the more comprehensive sort of, comprehensive, the more Globo style of gym, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I've just finished doing a 20 reps squat program off the Super Squats book by Strawson.
Okay.
And in that, you're supposed to bench press. Well, I don't have a bench at home, so I went to floor press. Never been a great bench presser, but I definitely found doing it this way much better on my joints.
I like the floor press. I think it's a.
Yeah.
I mean, if you do a pullover and press, which is the traditional version, I think it gives you a more dynamic movement anyway. And I've often put that in, not so much recently, but I had a couple of clients maybe a year ago that we spent a lot more time doing floor presses. There was more space to do them back then. And we'd do the floor pullover and press as part of it. We'd also, if you have an MMA fighter, we'd do a floor pushover and press with a wrestler's bridge and a few other things like that, which are much more technical.
Yes, I've done wrestler's bridge. It's not an easy exercise, and especially if you're going to start trying to pull a barbell over and then press it in that position, you've got to watch what you're doing, and you've got to have somebody show you how to do it that knows what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean,
you're going to end up with a broken neck.
There's a lot of exercises that, well, I say this is why I think the IOE All Round Weightlifting Association book on PDF is worthwhile for anyone that looks or wants to get into these exercises. It's not the greatest demo, but it gives you a much more open idea of what you should be doing or how you should be getting into those positions. Because if you see them and do them on your own, it's very difficult. We did back in Portugal. I had a friend that was used to come into the gym, and he was interested in the old school lifts. So we literally videoed, and I try and dig the video out. I think I still have it available. Was as many of the old school lifts as we could do. So we just do like a little video demonstration of each one. So like floor pull over and press. We'd do like the Reeves deadlift, suitcase deadlift, alternate weight lifts, bent press, a few other lifts like that, just to give people an idea. Because again, over there, apart from the physical culture or style of lifting, there wasn't very much available to explain to people what to do, you know. So, but yeah, no, it's a good lifting.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a thought. Then you look back to Steinborn, and before he came up with his idea of putting a bar onto his back the way that he did, they couldn't really put a lot of weight up on what they used to call deep knee bends.
Well, the only thing you could do was basically get someone to clean a bar up for you, lower it onto your back, which isn't an easy position to move from there to there anyway.
I mean, this guy, I think he went up to as high as £500 in Steinborn lift, you know, upending it onto one side and then lowering it onto his back and doing the lift. I mean, that's using just about every muscle in your body.
Yeah. And it's not easy to go from one side to the other, which is where you should go. But if you look at, say, like the Zercher lift, again, it was used from a deadlift position onto the knees, hook your arms underneath it, and then stand up, and then do your lifts like that. Again, it's another variation because they couldn't they didn't have a rack to hold the bar steady, and they'd use, whatever they could available. So, yeah, absolutely. I think with the advent of a disc size that allowed you to do a pullover and press, which is what the natural weights that were sort of being built over in America at the time were good enough to do a pullover and press. Because before that, we only had like cannonball sized dumbbells and things like that, and they were pre-weighted and things. That made it a lot more difficult to understand the lifts. But with something like a Steinborn, it was exactly the right thing because it was nice and fixed. You could turn it onto its side, get underneath it, bring it back up, and do your squats, you know. And then you've also got things we touched on them earlier about the bent press and stuff. Things like the Thomas Inch dumbbell and stuff like that, which were like a Coke can size cannonball dumbbell with a fairly short handle. In fact, on the video at the beginning of this, there was a little clip with a couple of circus dumbbells in the picture.
Yeah.
If you go back and have a look at that, if you're not sure what we're talking about, but
Well,
they are tremendously difficult to lift, to clean, and then from that position to then press or bent press is
yeah.
again a very difficult thing, but massively interesting for the grip. I
Yeah, well,
remember
we tried one of those, didn't we, when we were up in
I was,
Scotland
I was
at
just about to
Big
mention
Al's gym?
Scotland. Yes, I was just about to mention Scotland.
Yeah.
That was the first time you'd come across one, and we'd had a go at the lift itself and lifting it, which was just on its own, just lifting the thing. I think it was a baby inch. That was 53
Yeah.
kilos.
Well, do you know, I'm sure it were Steve Gardner that got the inch dumbbell remade, because he used to use it at the Oscar Heidenstam, I think it is, memorial.
Yeah,
and they had
Steve. Steve had them definitely.
Yeah, I think he was the first one to reintroduce them over here, because there were a bit of a competition going with them. Because I remember an article that he had of some of the old-time bodybuilders coming over and having a go at trying to lift it.
Well, I had a friend, when I sold my gym, the last gym I had some inch dumbbells from various sizes, so the baby inch and a couple of other ones from a couple of different companies. Put them up on an ad, and this guy down in south of England somewhere, I can't remember exactly where, put an offer in and won one of the bids. So I said I'd drop it down to him. I went down there, and he's just fascinated by the globe style dumbbells, the circus dumbbells, and had about 20 different variations on it. Some of them cost in sums because of their rarity, like £500-600, all the way down to my one, which was, I don't know, 150 quid or something for a single dumbbell. But these were, there were brass ones, there were all sorts of stuff I'd never even come across. But he'd managed to do all the research on them and things like that. But yeah, I mean, so Steve Gardner got me into grip work. Steve's the guy that owned Wayne Consortium and did the magazine. He got me into the grip work and nail bending and things like that. And it's an interesting area. He came down to my gym and trained there, and I've seen him at a couple of shows, and we've done some nail bending together and things. And then on the other side of the grip stuff, you've also got David Horn, who's another manufacturer of some pieces of kit, and I've got a load of grippers and stuff. We should, at some stage, we'll talk specifically about grippers and grip strength. We'll keep this one, we'll go back to this and try and keep it along the lines of the basics of strength and how you got going into that area, But,
Well, that's another thing, isn't it? I mean, if you go into grip strength, the original guys, as far as I'm aware, weren't using chalk for a lot of years. They certainly weren't using straps.
No straps.
And there's many of account of these guys pulling over 700 pound deadlifts.
Yeah.
And weighing less than 200 pound themselves.
If you go back to the all-round weightlifting stuff, there's like single finger deadlifts, and there's meat hook deadlift, which is like a one-handed version of things. And some of the weights that they're pulling now are quite severe as well. But you've also got along those lines, like eagle loops and things. There's loads of variations of deadlifting: one-handed deadlifts, two-handed double overhand deadlifts, thumbless deadlifts, one-handed thumbless deadlift, etc., etc., etc. So there's a lot just on there. So all the time that these guys were training, and if you look at some of the pictures of Eugene Sandown, he may not have had 20-inch biceps and everything, but his forearms were massive because they spent a lot of time working their grip, because that's the only way you could pick a weight up. You didn't have straps, as you say, to make it easier for you, which is effectively what they do now. With the advent of Eagle, the figure of 8 loops, which make it even easier. It's sort of, it will go back full circle at some stage, I'm sure, because there's as I say, there's an interest in the All-Round Weightlifting Association. It's a shame in a way with the All-Round Weightlifting Association that they are so adamantly drug free, purely because people outside of that sort of drug free grip stuff and that elitist sort of area don't then have a chance to learn all about how important grip stuff is as much as they could do if they were perhaps invited into a little corner of all-round weightlifting where drugs were allowed or whatever, you know, because I wouldn't want to be a hypocrite and go, oh, I'm going to compete or something in something like that when I'd be cheating effectively. Though I know there's a lot of guys way stronger than me in it, and I wouldn't want that to happen, you know. So, yes.
The old lifts are challenging though, and it's, what's the word? There's a sense of satisfaction when you actually get one right, because there is an element of complication there as well, and you've got to be on point when you're doing it. You've really got to concentrate.
Yeah.
As you know, you can't go in suddenly get psyched up out your brains, well, like you would in a bodybuilding thing, and then just start going at it. You can't sort of have that approach with it. You've got to be calculated and in control.
If you look at like the Turkish get up, for example,
yeah.
Again, it's something you can't rush into. There are people that can probably do it with 30, 40 kilo dumbbells or kettlebells, or barbells even. I've seen people do them with a full length 7-foot barbell. I wouldn't do that in training, but for show, again, it's another one of those show off exercises when it's like that, or tone it back down. I've seen it done. James Crosley, because he had a girl loop herself around his arm and on a Turkish get up that way. I think it was him. It might have been, I'm name dropping now, but might have been Terry Hollands. He was one of those sort of people anyway. That specialises in
we are in lack of space here. I used to do that balance in a sandbag, just a normal bag of sand from B&Q, and used to balance that on my hand because I found it more challenging than using a dumbbell.
Yeah, another way to work on improving your balance and everything, and proprioception in the muscle groups and things like that. So yeah, it's not a bad
teaches
thing.
movement.
Yeah,
and control.
I think we're getting to that point again where we should perhaps think about winding down, and then we'll come back next time with something about maybe grippers. We'll look at your running and stuff as well. So thanks very much, Steve, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah.